Okay, so welcome to this video. We just finished talking about Euler's method, which is pretty bad, but it's really important pedagogically. If we have f, which is really y prime, but in terms of both t and y, let's see what more we can get from Taylor. Okay, so we have y is approximately equal to y naught plus the derivative at that same starting point. So I'm thinking in terms of Maclaurin, but you could do it at any center you like. And I don't really want to put t in parentheses, I just meant times t. And then t squared over 2. I'm sorry, h squared. I'm just going to get rid of the t, so it's a little less confusing that way. Okay, and so this is h squared over 2 plus y triple prime of 0, h cubed over 6, and so on and so forth. So if you want to do an error analysis, you keep the last term after the last one you plan to use, and you put a c there. So for example, you'd say yiv of h to the 4th over 4 factorial, but you'd replace that h with a c, and then you'd have something like this going on. Okay, c would be somewhere between 0 and h, that kind of thing. So if you don't want to do the analysis, the error analysis right now, you can just get rid of that. And let's just say that this piece is Euler's method, or in other words, Taylor order 1. Okay, and when we do the Euler's method, just to review from the last video, is you start off with whatever your starting value is from your ODE, and then you're going to increment this guy as so forth. Okay, let me try to clean that up a little bit. Okay, now if we want to go one more level, we're going to say, hey, we're going to turn this into a Taylor order 2 method. Okay, and we're still going to have the same kind of setup, but we're going to now put this guy, this piece, in parentheses with something else. We're going to actually do h over 2 f prime of t-i-w-i. So that's conceptually what we're going to do, but we're going to have to implement that. Okay? So notice you would normally see h squared over 2, this h squared over 2 in a Taylor expansion, but because we're putting the h outside, we get a free h on the inside. Okay? There's some reasons for that, and one of them is to make the computation a tiny bit faster, which it's in this day and age we don't care, at least not very much. Definitely not for a pedagogical exercise, but because this is the way it's always been done, we're just going to abide by that convention. Okay, so let's set this up, and then in the next example we'll do an order, some other order. Okay, so let's set up this example. Okay, y prime is equal to y minus t squared plus 1. We will see a lot of this today. And y naught is 1/2. So let's set up a second order Taylor method on this problem. We're going to do that in Python. So when you are programming something, you have to first kind of write it down on paper a lot of the time. So we already know that f is equal to y minus t squared plus 1, but we're going to need to deal with this f prime business. Well, what is f prime? Well, we're going to have to use the chain rule, the product rule, all that good stuff. times the partial of f with respect to partial of y with respect to t, and then we're going to need partial of f with respect to t. Okay, but we already have the partial of y. We already have y prime because y prime is actually f. Okay, so this kind of looks like circular reasoning, but it isn't really. And then let's go ahead and figure out what that is. Okay, so f with respect to y is just 1. This f is just y minus t squared plus 1. And this guy is just going to be minus 2t. Right, so you put it all together and you get f prime in the formula ends up being y squared minus t squared plus 1 minus 2t. We're going to probably rearrange those pieces so they look a little nicer, but that's the way they are for now. We know that w naught is 1/2. I'm just going to not use subscripts on my w's. So in the book they're going to use a lot of subscripting, but I'm just going to let the loop take care of that for me. I'm going to let h equal to whatever. I'm going to experiment with that as we write the code. My starting value is t is 0. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to say actually while t is less than 2, I'm going to say w equals something. I'm going to increment it. Then I'm going to do this cheesy trick where t equals t plus h. It's okay so long as when you're done your t, you're going to look at those last digits of t and make sure you haven't accumulated a lot of error. This is cheesy, and this is why the book uses indexing, because you should actually just calculate each t based on first principles rather than just adding it to the previous t. Okay, so the error will accumulate on t, but I'm okay with that because I want you to take the fastest path towards comprehension and not worry about all the nitty-gritty, picky details of this. Okay, so you're going to do w equals w plus h times, and then this is that t2 expression that we had in the previous bit. Okay, so what is that? It's going to be w minus t squared plus 1 minus 2t, so this is the f prime part, plus h over 2, I'm sorry, I need to put the f part, not the f prime part, so I put the f prime part in the wrong place here. This goes over here, and I need to put the f part, the original f we had to begin with, w minus t squared plus 1. Okay, so that's going to be, all that stuff is going to be multiplied by h. Again, this is really just the second derivative of y. And the reason why you only have one h instead of h squared over 2 is because the other h is over there. Okay, it's outside of the expression. All right, so let's go ahead and set that up in Python. Okay, so I have this set up in Python, and I'm picking h as 0.01, and I'm going to just run this thing up and see what happens. Hopefully it works. And I'm looking at my t, and I see there's only a little bit of error accumulated, so I'm not really worried about it, but I'm just doing that sanity check to make sure I didn't do something horrible. And what is my new w? And I've done this problem recently, like 5 minutes ago before my last video failed, so I know that I'm in the right vicinity. Okay, so we will keep working on this problem, and I encourage you not to just open Python and do what I'm doing. I encourage you to open a separate file to store your code so that it's much easier to make corrections when you make typos, so that you don't have to retype everything. So do as I say, not as I do, although I usually use files, but it's just because I wanted this sort of live experience right now in class. I wanted you to see the code come to life rather than just bring up something on the screen that I typed before. Okay, but I want you to see that this pseudocode that I have on the screen is exactly what I typed, and it's probably useful for you guys to pull up Python and just recreate this to make sure that you've got all the things typed in correctly as well. This may be a good time to tell you this little thing. There's a book I like called, I think I emailed you about it, Introduction to Applied Numerical Analysis by Richard Hamming. And you can see this is the information about the book itself. The author died in 1998, but he was very instrumental in many things. Very famous guy. I really love this book though, and not because he's famous. So something he said in the beginning of chapter 1 is he said, look, if you were going to do multiplication, like the typical multiplication you need to do, like probably on a slide rule or on paper, you could do about 3 per minute. And I think he's being really generous. I don't think I could do 3 per minute and maintain that for any amount of time. But he said a relay machine, it only takes a second to do it. But an electronic computer from 1969, you get about 1 million calculations per second. Great. What about now? Well, I looked this up, and apparently on your iPhone or iPad or whatever, iPhone is going to give you about over 3 billion per second. So this is an explanation for why you do not have to worry about optimizing your code in this class, because our computers are so big and so buff and we have so many digits that I don't even want you to worry about that. Because if you were sending some code up to the moon on an old computer from the 70s, you would care, but right now you don't care. I want you to really understand the underpinnings of what we're talking about, and so I don't want you to follow the book's lead in the sense that the book does a lot of algebra, a lot. So like this problem in the book, they'll combine all these w and t squared in one, and then they'll factor out the h squared and do all sorts of fancy stuff. So the only time you should bother with that is if you are following along in the book with an exercise and you want to verify that you understand it. So you don't need to do it unless it's just for comprehension. Then it's worth doing. Okay? All right. So we're going to go to the next stage with this. We're going to set up a 4th order Taylor method for the same exercise. Okay? And so we're going to need f double prime and f triple prime. And so I want to go back up here and just grab all this stuff that we did. I'm just going to grab that, and I'm going to try to go back down here and at least use some of the same work. Okay, so we have some of the same work, and we're going to try to continue this. Now this bit is all going to change, but the structure is going to look the same. So now we have to find y double prime and y triple prime here. So f double prime is going to be, well, we're going to have to use the same chain rule and all that stuff, just like we did before, and now we're just going to do it one level deeper. So f prime, take the derivative with respect to t, and you're going to get minus 2t minus 2. F prime with respect to y is going to be hold on a second. Okay, I realize I made some kind of clerical error here. There was never a squared on that y, and so that's why I copied it. But notice I didn't actually propagate that error, so in my actual code I didn't make that mistake, but there was never a squared on this y. So I apologize for the error and for the fact that it is now propagated down to this exercise. So I'm going to just get rid of that error right now and go back to this stage. Okay, so I'm going to take the derivative with respect to t, and I'm going to get minus 2t minus 2, which is what I got before I messed up the y's. The derivative with respect to y of that previous quantity is just 1, and then f is y minus t squared plus 1. Okay, and then I'm going to just rewrite that in a nicer format. I'm going to put y first, and then I'm going to put my minus t squared down, and then minus 2t. And notice I have minus 2 and a plus 1, so I'm just going to write down minus 1. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and rearrange these little terms here too. Let's see. I don't need this to become a problem, so I just want all my terms in the same order. I could have erased them and rewritten them, but I just want to make sure you believe me that it's the same. Okay? Alright, now I'm going to do the third derivative, and you should do it yourself. Do the third derivative and come back and see if you agree with me. Okay, hopefully you left and came back and now you're agreeing with me. So I'm going to take the second derivative and take the derivative of that with respect to t, and look again at the second derivative of f, take the partial with respect to y, and multiply by f again. Okay, so the partial of the previous thing with respect to t is minus 2t minus 2, and the partial with respect to y is just 1, and f is the same. So this is really spooky, but this is the same f double prime and f triple prime, just by some luck happen to be the same value, like the same exact expression. So all this feels like we were just running around in circles, but actually we just bought ourselves some simplicity is all that happened. Okay, now we're going to try to put all these pieces back together and in here. So what is it that we're trying to do? So we remember from Taylor's expansion, so usually we have h times, let's say f in this case, because it's y prime, h squared over 2 is going to be f prime, but because this h is going to be out of the picture, because the h is over here, so everything that we normally do in Taylor is decreased by a single h. And notice, like, this is kind of does a number on my head every time I do it. So let me just do it out with Taylor's, and then I'll swap everything out. It's going to be h times y prime, and then h squared over 2 times y double prime, h cubed over 6 times y triple prime, but I want a fourth order. So yeah, I think I need one more derivative, h to the fourth over 24 y to the iv. Okay, but now what does that equal? Since one of the h's is gone, and then all the y's get knocked down to f status. So this is just going to be f plus f prime over 2 plus h squared over 6 f double prime plus h cubed over 24, and then this is going to be f triple prime. Okay, so that's the piece. All that stuff is going to get squeezed into this region over here. But in our particular case, here's this crazy thing. F double prime and triple prime is the same thing. So I'm just going to make my life a little easier and combine these. So this is specific to this problem. This is not part of the technique, but we already know this about the problem. So we're going to take advantage of this. So we're going to group these together. And this is f triple prime, which is f double prime. And let's see, I'm just going to move this over so I can squeeze all this stuff in here. Okay, let me just double check that. Okay, and just as a reminder, if we were to chop here, this part would just give us the second order Taylor approximation that we already just did. All right, and because this is an academic exercise, we happen to have that the solution to y is t plus 1 squared minus 0.5 e to the t. So by the magic of, well, this is just a pretend problem, we can actually compare our method against the theoreticals. The theoretical and the actual solution we can compare like that. Okay? So now we're going to set that up in Python. Okay, so here I am back in Python, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the best way to do this, I want to compare T2 and T4. I want to compare the Taylor order 2 and 4 with the actual solution, but I'm going to do this in a loop. It would help to have F, so I'm going to call this F. I'm going to do F in terms of T and Y, even though we're going to use W. That's okay. And I'm going to say that's Y minus T squared plus 1. And I'm going to say FP is another one of these functions. So FP is Y minus T squared minus 2T plus 1. Except for some reason I keep hitting the equal sign when I try to hit the minus sign. Let me double check that. FP should be Y minus T squared minus 2T plus 1. And F double prime is going to be Y minus T squared minus 2T minus 1. Okay, so now I have that. I want to pick my H. What was my H? I think I can live with that H. I'm going to let T equal 0. But I need two W's now because I need W for T2 to be 0.5, and I need W for the T4 method to also be 0.5 because they're going to be going up differently from each other. Otherwise, this wouldn't be fair. All right. So, while T is less than 2, WT2 is equal to WT2 plus H times F of T and W. Okay? And meanwhile, WT4 is going to be, but I messed that up. But there is no W. It has to be WT2. WT4 is going to be WT4 plus H times the following. I need F of T plus H over 2 times F prime of T plus H squared over 6 plus H cubed over 24 times F double prime, which is the same as triple prime, of T, and WT4 goes in there. And now I'm sure I must have messed up the typing, so I'm just going to double check. So this parenthesis should match with this one over here. So let me just make sure I have the same number of opening and closing parentheses. H squared over 6 plus H cubed over 24 is going to be multiplied by F double prime, which is the same as F triple prime. That looks safe to me. If I messed up, it's probably there. And then I'm just going to do my usual T equals T plus H trick, which is cheesy. And then what I'm going to do, oh man, I actually have no idea why that was a problem. Okay. Let me pause this and figure out why my computer hates me. Okay, I just didn't count my parentheses right. You guys probably caught that. That one was right. This one was missing an extra parenthesis, or I could just remove this one here. So let's see, I have open, then I have open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, and finally a close. Good. Now print T, WT2, WT4, and the actual answer, which is T plus 1 squared minus 0.5 times EXP of T. So there we go. Let's see if this works. I'm gonna hold my breath here. I said from math import star, did I not? Maybe I didn't. Alrighty then, let's go back. And this is why you should use a file instead of doing what I'm doing. There we go. Alright, this does not look right, but it looks close to being right. Let me pause this for a second. Okay, I think I just forgot to reset all my variables or something. I don't know. I'm not really sure what happened. Let me go back and look at this. So I used a different H step than I'm used to, but this, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's just because I used a very small H step. Anyway, I will leave that as an exercise for you to sort out, but basically the structure is right. It might actually be right. I'm just going to pause this and try this again. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure that the the T4 is right. It's the T2 that I'm suspicious of, but maybe I shouldn't be. Okay, anyway, so that's the way it goes. Sometimes you're 100% sure of yourself and sometimes you're not, and this is just one of the times. I have no idea why my second order Taylor polynomial is performing so poorly, but it is, and even when I made a smaller step size, it was off by more than I expected it to be. So anyway, maybe it just is that way. So that's something to keep in mind. This is something that we are looking at. Okay, I did mention already, if you want to do an error analysis, then you will use the first term that didn't occur in your technique. So you use the first, the next Taylor term you would have included, and you turn that t value into a c value, and you use that as an estimate for your error. Okay, moving right along. So nobody actually uses Euler methods. Nobody uses Euler, but it's important pedagogically. Great. Okay, we need to build a conceptual framework to explain what happens next. First of all, it is a huge pain to try finding f prime, f double prime, f triple prime. I don't know about you, but it just doesn't seem very numerical to me. If we're essentially going to have a computer at our disposal, why don't we do something a little more numerical? Or maybe figure out something about how f behaves, pull f values from other places. Okay, so let's consider your T2 method. Consider a pen that doesn't work. Oh man. Okay, here I am back again. Hopefully my computer will behave for me. So ultimately what we want to do is we want to do something like this. Let's say we want some kind of axis, and then we want some sort of thing going on like this. We want to say we're going to take, here's the actual solution. And here's a point at t. Here's a point at t plus h. And somewhere in here is t plus h over 2. Okay? And so, you know, if you look at f is really defined for all these t values and all these y values, not just the ones where our particular function cuts through. And so this whole area is ripe for sampling. We want to sample where we think a better derivative estimate might be. Okay, so let's see, like, what did we do in T2? In Taylor's second method, the thing we multiplied by h was f of tw plus h over 2 f prime of tw. So what did that mean? So we sampled right about here what f should be, and then we went over and said, well, the second derivative, we're going to use a component of the second derivative to kind of estimate the second derivative over here. So we're going to estimate the second derivative at our home base and try to use that to shoot out and hopefully adjust our actual derivative that we're using. So we were looking at all the information centered right here at t. What we're going to do instead is we're going to say, hey, maybe this happened to you by accident. Maybe sometimes you tried finding the derivative here and then you shot off too far, right? Because here's the derivative here. I'm going to drag the derivative back. Well, that's too much. So maybe what we want to do is say, okay, well, y is here currently. And if we looked at the derivative here, that's too high. Maybe it's too low here. Maybe if we look at the derivative right around there, we'll get a better estimate. So basically, I want you to just think of this whole region where these points are living, and just think of a neighborhood in two different dimensions. And everywhere in that region are possible places where you might get a better derivative estimate. Okay? So what we're going to do instead is we're going to do something different. We're going to do f of t plus h over 2. So this is how we're going to estimate a good derivative for y. And we're going to take the y value to be our previous y value estimate plus h over 2 f of tw. So what does this mean? Let's tear this apart. So the easy part is this part. This just means that as our t estimate, we're going to go halfway between our current t and our future t. So that seems reasonable. So we're just lined up along here, and somewhere on that blue line, we're going to pull off a derivative that we're going to then apply down here at our starting point. That's what we're going to do. How are we going to find the y value, though, at which we're going to make this estimate? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little half Euler. Think of it as half a step of Euler takes us from our current w. We're going to only step h over 2 towards in that direction. So we're going to pretend like this is Euler's method. All right, then we're just going to go here. I mean, I over exaggerated that. So really our derivative is more like this. And so I'm making a bad picture here. But we're only going to go half a step rather than going all the way out where Euler would have us go. We're going to go halfway there. And then we're going to take that point, and at that point, we're going to sample. We're going to sample f. And so maybe the derivative that's recommended here looks like that. Well, in that case, we're going to get a better estimate. Okay? So you kind of have to look at these and figure out what all these pieces are doing. And it's kind of interesting how they built all this. This idea that we could sort of take a step, go halfway, take a sample, go back, build this to form a new derivative, and that's essentially what's going on. So this particular method has a name. I do not like the name because it sounds a lot like other things we say all the time. We actually call this the midpoint method. Again, I'm not going to ask you to remember the name. There's a couple other methods. These are all Runge-Kutta methods. And I will call them, so the midpoint method is the most basic one, and then you have modified Euler, which I'm not going to cover, and I don't even know how to pronounce this guy, Kuhn's method. I don't know how to pronounce it, but these guys are all Runge-Kutta methods that I'm not going to cover. Okay, now the one we are going to cover is RK4, or Runge-Kutta of order 4, and I'm not going to cover, but you should be aware that the next level up is Runge-Kutta 5. So what usually, and it's also called Runge-Kutta-Fehlberg when you combine Runge-Kutta 4 and Runge-Kutta 5. So what that does is you run Runge-Kutta 4 and Runge-Kutta 5 together at the same time, and then you use their difference to estimate how close you're getting to the answer. When Runge-Kutta 4 and 5 are as close as you want, you just conclude that you've met your goal and you're going to be okay with that as your solution. Okay? So then let's go ahead and just dive into Runge-Kutta 4. I'm going to set this up. Okay, so now we're ready to talk about Runge-Kutta. So first of all, this is where you start. So you only need to do this W equals A one time. And then this part repeats. Repeat that part. Okay, so you're going to calculate K1, K2, K3, K4, and those are all, like, look at this. You're not taking the derivative of F. So F is just Y prime, and so you're just making use of that structure, and you're sampling F in different unique places. So it's kind of like you're saying, well, let's take an Euler step, and we're going to use a little bit of that to try to balance off where our next sample is, and then we're going to take another step and back off and figure out where our next sample is. And all this algebra is completely within your ability. It's just annoying. You could figure out that if you were going to do something of this style, that the weighting functions would have to be as they currently are. And then you would find out that K1 and K4 would be, each have a weight of 1, and K2 and K3 have to have double that weight. That's a total of 6. And so then you would weigh those all out. Okay, so after you're done with updating W, you have to, of course, update T. And again, as long as your error doesn't accumulate too badly, and in these exercises it won't, then you can go ahead and use this cheesy increment method to just say T equals T plus H. I will warn you that in the book and in other places, they're going to write it a little differently. So the way I write this is a simplification. So what happens is they usually write, instead of T, they write T sub I. And so then, for example, down here, they will write T I plus 1. And to me, it's like, well, that's just T I plus H. So that's why I got rid of all the subscripts, and I just said, look, I just want it to be something that's easy to code, and so I'm getting rid of the subscripts because at each round, W is whatever it is, and then when I get to the end of my T's, I just stop. And so that's my simplification on the process. So you're going to do something like, in Python, you're going to say, while T is less than 2, or whatever your endpoint is, you're going to say, all this stuff, and then you're going to print out something. All right, so you're going to do all this stuff. All this stuff is going to go inside here, and then you're going to print something that tells you what's going on. Okay, and if you know the actual solution, you should print that too, so that you can do a comparison. So you want to print your T, you want to print RK4, and you want to print the actual if you have it. Okay, so that should be enough to get you through the homework. This is a fun little coding exercise, and I always find it very satisfying to get to Runge-Kutta, because then you're using something that's really accurate, very powerful, and very elegant. And so I hope you enjoy that.